Hello, my name is Barby. I'm assuming you already knew that, but if you didn't, hello, my name is Barby and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing the 3 most genuinely scary horror movies I've ever seen. And I don't mean like gory or like just generally disturbing. I mean the 3 ones that actually made me afraid to go to sleep at night, which is a very hard thing to do. Because I consume so much horror, it's really rare for me to find a book or a movie that really keeps me awake. I mean, it's even more difficult to find a TV show since it's so drawn out, but we'll get to that another time. There have been a couple exceptions to this. There have been some movies that really shook me to my core, but when I really think about the ones that actually bothered me in my adult life, it really comes down to these 3. So, I'm going to be going in order from least scary to most scary. The most scary is 100% the most horrific horror movie I've ever seen in my entire life. And when people are looking to shit their pants, this is 100% without fail the one I will always recommend. So without any further ado, number 3 goes to Us, which is directed by Jordan Peele. So this is a bit complicated because there were parts of the movie I really did not enjoy. So I'm not saying it's one of my favorite movies, but I do think there are certain scenes that are just so grotesque and so terrifying. And I don't mean grotesque in the visceral sort of way with guts all over the floor or anything like that. I just mean like nightmarish. Like, oh my god, if this ever happened to me, I do not know what I would do. So first of all, the whole idea of doppelgangers really scares me a lot in the first place because it was one of my introductions into like the kind of ghostly world. And the idea behind them is just freaking terrifying. It's like if you see your double, it usually heralds death. That's an omen that goes way, way back. That is a long-held belief that has been around since before spoons. Maybe not, but either way, it's very old. That idea goes back a long, long time, and Us is primarily focused on this one family and their shadows. So the shadows aren't exactly them, but they look just like them. They don't exactly talk just like them, which is something I'm gonna get to. But still, like, they see them and they know this cannot be a good thing. And it is definitely not a good thing. So the mother, I believe her name is Adelaide, she comes face to face with her shadow as well as the rest of the family. And let me just tell you, her shadow has this terrible voice that makes it sound like somebody was stomping all over her windpipe. And it is terrifying. It is absolutely horrific. There's this one scene in which the shadow is kind of explaining who they are, why they're there, in vague and obscure terms, but nonetheless. And you literally cannot even sit through it without cringing. Every time she spoke, it really did feel like, it just sounded painful. It sounded like this woman, every time she spoke, was like gasping for air or being crushed, and I can't explain why, but that paired with the color schemes and like just the huge eyes she has on while she's saying all this, it really makes for a nightmare sequence, and it's one that I've never been able to get out of my head. So I definitely think that's worth a watch if you haven't watched it. I mean, it's not a jump scare, not in the slightest, and the plot can get really confusing. But if Jordan Peele was trying to scare people, he definitely did that in abundance, because that is one character that every time I see it or see reference to it, I'm like, oh yeah, that is horror. That is not something I want to think about before I go to sleep at night. So yeah, props to Us. It gave me some really, really freaky, insane thoughts, and that's what these movies are supposed to do, because being scared, some of us, is like being comforted. And if you're anything like me, maybe you'll agree. So number 2 would be Sinister. Sinister is actually commonly known as one of the scarier, more outright terrifying horror movies, and I cannot agree more myself. The demon Bagel, I think his name is pronounced like Bagel. I mean, it's spelled the same. Anyways, he is just, his entire face is pretty much this like weird devil mask looking thing, but he doesn't have a mouth, and the whole idea here is that he's basically possessing kids to commit murder on their families and then record it. So you have this guy come in, this guy who just moved into this house because he's a true crime writer. and he's going to do the story on this house. So obviously his whole family lives with him, and you can probably guess what winds up happening. He finds the tapes, he watches the tapes. Things just progressively get worse from there. But there is one scene that I believe is worse than all the others, even though I want to add that even from the beginning, it doesn't exactly let up. It's pretty hard to watch the entire time. And as I said before, not in the visceral, gory kind of way, just the kind of way where you're like, this is uncomfortable, I feel like I am in danger, and I don't know what I would do. So yeah, most definitely that one in concept and in execution is just, it's just extremely hard to digest. It's like such a difficult, sad, and just foreboding concept. It's one that's hard to get out of your head. So this one is kind of just atmospherically creepy all around. But like I said, there is one scene where one of the families beforehand, they're all like tied up, they have their mouths taped shut, and presumably the child has a knife. And, you know, if their throats are all out like this, I'm sure you know what he's planning on doing with the knife. But just the slow progression, the way you're like, just do it already, I can't watch anymore, like that, it just gets to you. It gives you goosebumps, and it makes it super duper effective. The scares in this movie are so well thought out and so like well planned that oftentimes you forget about the well-being of the protagonist and his family, and you just think, okay, like, what fucked up thing do you have to show me next? It all adds up to this deep and complicated story, but the really horrifying thing about this is you have family, something that's presumably safe, presumably innocent, and then this outside force just corrupting the entire show and kind of leaving everybody for dead. This is just as interesting as it is horrifying. And while, unlike Us, I couldn't really pin everything down to one scene, I do feel like that makes it a better movie, because just throughout, you stay entertained and you stay absolutely messed up throughout the entire thing. It is really difficult to get out of your head. So yeah, if you haven't seen Sinister, I would get on that ASAP. A lot of people definitely will agree with me on this one. And now for number one, the scariest movie I have ever seen in my entire life is Hereditary, by far. I remember I went to go see this with my friends at the movie theater when it first came out, and I went home and actually could not sleep the entire night. It is a slow burn. It is creepy. You have no idea what's going on until you do know what's going on, and then you wish you didn't. So essentially, people who are really into like occult stories, like demonic entities, things like that, will get a kick out of this movie, but I think so will most horror fans. It has a couple jump scares, but it's not really heavy on jump scares. It is very, very plot driven, which I think all the best stories are. And the characters are complex, the acting is almost flawless, and there's one scene where Toni Collette, who plays the mother, has this giant breakdown at the dinner table, and the lighting for it is just so right. Like, every choice in this movie you could tell was extremely deliberate, and it all works because you are uncomfortable from start to finish, and you just kind of want to get out of these people's sights, honestly. There are a couple notorious scenes in this, and with good reason, like the telephone pole, if you know, you know. That's just so hard to watch. Like, to think of something like that happening, I want to get more specific, but I really don't want to spoil this for people who haven't seen it, because it is the kind of thing where you should really go in blind. I mean, you should be aware of what you're about to walk into, but yeah, you should go in blind. This is one of those hopeless stories where you know that things are not going to be okay. You know that there's no way that they could possibly work out, but you're still hoping, and you're still holding on to that last shred of hope that maybe it will get better, maybe it will improve. But it just, you know that that's not possible. You know that there are bigger forces and that that's just not going to happen. It explores sadness and grief and turns them into genuine dread and fear. And it's just completely mind-blowing. Honestly, not only is this one of the scariest, but it's also one of the smartest and best horror movies I've ever seen. whenever someone wants to get into the genre, this is always something I recommend. Probably not the best idea for beginners, but either way, I think go hard or go home. So there you go. So the real fear lies in the small ways this family starts to fall apart, the dramatic ways the secrets are revealed one after another after another. I mean, it's just too much for any human being to take. And so you really see these people deteriorate before your very eyes, and you feel sorry for them, but there's like nothing you or anybody else could do, not even them, because there's something going on that has spawned generations and generations, and it doesn't look like it's going away that easy. There are also a lot of people that are in on this, and they're not exactly who you'd expect. So part mystery, part drama, but 100% horror. Hereditary is easily one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I still have trouble sleeping sometimes if I think about it that much, and it's probably my go-to. Probably my number one in a lot of different aspects. So those are the 3 horror movies that genuinely scared me. Like I said, that's a really hard thing to do. I'm not into gore. I'm not really into blood and guts, just personally not my thing. But I do love staying up late at night thinking about something, thinking about the psychological implications of if this were to happen in real life. And these were the ones that seriously got to me. Most of them made me sad as well. But I think that's a part of it. A part of it is just like, if you have those emotions while you're watching something on a screen, then odds are it was really well made. Or at least it hit the mark. It did what it came to do. And yeah. Nowadays, as I said before, we have a lot of tropes in horror movies that are overused. These 3 are completely original. Don't use any of those. So it's also good they're also good recommendations creatively if you're looking for something different. So yeah, this has been Barbie. Let me know in the comments if you agree or if you think I'm dead wrong, because if you do think I'm wrong, I would love to hear what you think is scarier. And don't say a Serbian film, because it isn't. Thank you.